Hello, and thank you for joining Eastern Florida State College for our annual Constitution Day celebration. My name is Christopher Muro, Associate Political Science Professor, and your host for today's event, a conversation with Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey. Today's program is a celebration of the signing of the United States Constitution and is part of a series of events and activities at Eastern Florida State College designed to enhance civic literacy and civic engagement. On September 17, 1787, 39 delegates, after months of heated debate, signed the final draft of the United States Constitution, which was then sent to the states for approval or rejection. 235 years later, this document stands as the world's longest surviving governing charter. Its durability, its longevity remains a testament to its genius. Through civil war and unrest, global conflict, economic collapse, natural disasters, terrorism, pandemics, enemies both foreign and domestic, one thing has remained unshakable and enduring: the United States Constitution. It is the document that protects freedom for ourselves and our posterity, and it is the tie that binds the generations of Americans together. For these reasons, Congress adopted in 2004 a provision calling upon America's institutions of higher learning to implement activities that will bring awareness and appreciation to our founding document, the United States Constitution. I want to thank the staff at WEFS TV, my esteemed colleague Josh Humphreys, and the many people who volunteered to help make today's broadcast event possible. Please enjoy from our law library on the beautiful Cocoa campus at Eastern Florida State College, our Constitution Day 2022 program, A Conversation with Sheriff Wayne Ivey. Welcome, Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey. It's a pleasure to have you on our campus of Cocoa campus at Eastern Florida State College. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure, man. Always glad to work with you guys. We're great partners with the college here, and the work product you guys put out, second to none. So excited to be here.
I appreciate that. Well, this is an exciting program that we have today. We are celebrating the Constitution and its 235th birthday. So the Constitution has been around for a long time. It's the longest surviving governing document in world history. What do you believe, Sheriff Ivey, are the factors that have made the Constitution so durable and has lasted so long?
Yeah. So, you know, when I look at the Constitution, I think the four corners of that document are truly what separate us from every other country on the planet. Our forefathers had enough wherewithal and forethought to look at how this document would be perceived, how it would be interpreted for decades, years to come. And I think if you break it down and look at the simplicity of it, it was really what was important to them at that time. It was what was important to them from the aspect of freedom, of those things that are our rights and our guarantees. And fast forward now to 2022, and those same things are what's important to us today: our freedoms, our rights, our guarantees, the things that make people want to leave the country that they were born in and come be a part of America. And so when I look at the Constitution, I think the four corners of that document are truly what separate us from everybody else. And it has stood the test of time. It will always stand the test of time. And for those of us that understand it's what we took an oath to uphold, I think it's vital to our country.
So it seems you're saying that the freedom and the liberty that people yearn for, time is irrelevant to that. And people are always going to want to seek those things, freedom and prosperity and the Constitution has delivered.
That's right, and it's the right of the people. It's the power of the people that is ingrained in those four corners of that document. And since I was 18 years old, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution. Since I was 18 years old, I've been serving as a law enforcement officer, and the importance of that to protecting our citizens, the importance of that to protecting the laws of our land. And now you look in the position I sit in today as sheriff, and the things that I stand on to say, no, you're not coming here and violating our citizens' rights. And that's sometimes a message to government that we're gonna protect the rights of our citizens just as much as we protect their homes or we protect their cars.
Well, that's a great point, because there's been almost, is it fair to say that there's a movement across the country? There's 3,081 elected sheriffs in the United States, and there seems to be a movement called the Constitutional Sheriff. I'm seeing this more and more in articles all across the country. There's a website, and I believe there's even a hashtag, so you know it's official.
Yeah.
The Constitutional Sheriff. What is this movement about? What is at the heart of this movement?
So, you know, if you go back and you look at how that really kind of all started, the Constitutional Sheriff movement, it really started with a sheriff by the name of Richard Mack, who joined with others in fighting the Brady Bill. Took it all the way to the Supreme Court, the way it was wanting citizens' guns to be documented and registered. And so Sheriff Mack really back then became the first the first sheriff that people recognized as the Constitutional Sheriff. And what he actually did was, it wasn't anything specific to him or any other sheriff. It was him saying, I think this violates the Constitution. I think this violates my citizens' rights. And he stood on the soapbox and pounded his fist and took it all the way to Supreme Court and was successful in that. So I think if you go back and look at where did that phrase or that movement really start, it started there. But if you go further back and understand that the sheriff is elected by the people, serves the people, can only be taken out of office by the people, then it really puts into a perfect frame that the sheriff is standing there to, again, not only protect citizens against criminals that might do them harm, but to protect them against tyranny, to protect them against their rights being stripped and taken away from them or violated. And so the sheriffs, as you pointed out, 3,000 plus across the country, they come from all different walks of life. They come from, many of us are Republicans and conservatives. Many of the sheriffs are Democrats and liberals. Some of them are elected in nonpartisan races. But at the end of the day, they all serve the same purpose, and that is to take an oath to the Constitution and to protect the people they were elected to protect.
Well, it's an interesting point that government, on one hand, is there to protect freedom and liberty for its citizens. On the other hand, it has the power to create and enforce law and to even seize assets and incarcerate people and take away their liberty and even their life on death row.
So
that's quite a balancing act. And it seems what you're saying is that the sheriff's office plays a key role in striking that very important balance.
That's exactly right. And you know, the thing that the Constitution does is it gives all the branches of government their due diligence in their jobs, but it also protects against overreach, and that's the key to this. Creating laws that are designed to protect citizens are one thing. But when you overreach the Constitution and start taking away rights and privileges and freedoms of citizens, that's where that's where it stops, and that's where the sheriffs have to stand up. And you know, listen, there are times where things come down, and we'll use the Second Amendment because that's always one of the things that's on the table of people saying, what are you going to do as a sheriff if they come to take my guns? And of course, my response is always, well, the first thing I'm going to do is hide all of mine, and especially the little pink one that my wife has, because I would never want anybody to think that's mine. But you know, at the end of the day, we're going to stand up and protect our citizens. We're going to stand up and protect the Second Amendment. But it's not just about the Second Amendment. That's the one that's talked about often. Right. But it's about all of the Constitution. It's about protecting the overreach against First Amendment, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, making sure that we're staying within the Fourth Amendment and unlawful, search and seizure and everything. So the design is to protect the people, but it's also to make sure that no one can overrun it.
So I think maybe some of those folks who might criticize the concept of the constitutional sheriff, where does the sheriff's office get that authority to serve as a check in that capacity? What would you say to those critics who say this may be an overreach on the part of the sheriff's office?
So for me, it all comes back to what the Constitution says, the right of the people. And my job, I'm elected by the citizens, and the sheriff and the other constitutional officers are all set up that way. If you look, for example, at a chief of police that serves the city manager, and then the city manager serves at the leisure of 5 to 7 commissioners in most cases. So when you look at that, excuse me, when you look at that chief of police, if they don't do what the city manager may want them to do, they could lose their job. In fact, at one time, I don't know if it's still true, the expected longevity of a chief of police was about 3 years. The sheriff is going to stand up for what they believe in. It fits into the realm of the Constitution, and the only person that can remove them, unless they violate the law and commit a felony, is the electors. Right. And so it gives the sheriff the ability to stand up for the Constitution, to stand up and say no.
Let me ask you, do you have a lot of interaction, does the sheriff's office have a lot of interaction with the federal government, federal agencies in particular, whether they're legislative or executive branch?
Sure. For us, we'll look at law enforcement first. With our local, I always tell everybody, we have great local, state, and federal partners. The men and women that are in the trenches rolling up their sleeves out here protecting our citizens all work together. In fact, many times if you go on a scene and somebody's there in a green uniform or somebody's there in a blue uniform or a black uniform or a jacket, other than the color of their uniform, you wouldn't know what agency they work for. And that's a great a tool for the citizens to be protected. The sheriff has jurisdiction throughout the county. The cities, of course, have jurisdiction in their city, their municipality. The feds, there are many investigations that go outside of our jurisdiction. So we need our state partners, such as the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. We need our federal partners to be able to extend and reach those tentacles that we need to. And then, of course, we work with our judicial branch. That is the deciding factor. I always tell everyone that our job is to get the person we've arrested from point A to point B. Point C is what happens with them with the judge. And I think there is just incredible importance in all three of those elements.
Now, in recent years and decades, what I've noticed is a resurgence in a very important constitutional principle, and that principle is federalism, the division of power between the national government and the state governments. And I think in the past few years, we've really seen an acceleration towards swinging back to more independence at the state and local level on a lot of issues, abortion, immigration, guns, mask and vaccine mandates, and the like. What is your take on why are we seeing this resurgence or this rediscovery of federalism, and is this a positive development in your view, Sheriff?
It is, and you'll always see that pendulum swing as Supreme Court nominations and appointees are there. You'll see some shifting of that, and again, talk about design and strategy. There's another perfect example of how things should be with the Supreme Court and the ability to appoint someone to it. So, probably the most recent one on the table right now is the recent Roe v. Wade decision that was handed down from the Supreme Court, returning that power to the state, to the people. And some people have really gotten out of line with what that decision actually did. It just basically put it back on the onus of the state to do with immigration. You talked about mask mandates and vaccines. Each state handled the response to COVID in an entirely different manner.
Speaking of the Bill of Rights, though, Florida has a constitution with a Bill of Rights, and I think it's more commonly known, though, the Bill of Rights in the United States Constitution. And we've hit on a couple of these issues, but I wanted to develop them a little bit more. Could we start with the Fourth Amendment, the right against unreasonable searches and seizures, and the need for probable cause, and how does that affect your work as sheriff?
Yeah, so for us, I've been doing this job 42 years now, and so from day one, when you go to police academy, you're taught about the Fourth Amendment and the protection of our citizens against unlawful search and seizure, unreasonable, the fact that you have to have probable cause to present to a judge in an affidavit format. All of those things are taught to us in our very early stages of our careers. You also, again, you take that oath. When I swear our team in, every time I do a swearing, I am swearing them in to uphold the Constitution of the state of Florida and of the United States of America. So we take it as not only an oath, but a part of thought process. This could be my family member that's impacted by it. It could be me, of all those things. So you want to do everything right. And when you look at the protection against unlawful search and seizure, I know what the painstaking process we go through to do an affidavit for a search warrant, a seizure affidavit. It's a very detailed process. I have been where I thought, okay, we're there. We've got the probable cause we need. And you go to the judge, and the judge says, nope, you're not there. The thing for us, though, is when you do cross that threshold and the judge goes, you're there, it's a protection of the integrity of your case as well. So not only is it a protection of the citizens and their rights, but it's also a protection of the integrity of that case, and it'll stand the challenge that comes in. So for us, it's about doing everything right.
And the Second Amendment, I know that you've already mentioned how important that is, and gun rights are extremely important for protecting one's property, one's family, and also against a tyrannical government. Those are all very important things.
Right.
But we have noticed in recent months and over the past year or so a dramatic increase in our murder rate nationally, an increase in mass shootings, and in particular, there's a lot of attention being put on shootings that occur at schools and on campuses around the country.
Right.
How do we find a balance between the rights of gun owners and this problem that we're seeing now, and especially among our younger people?
Right. So I would say two things here. First and foremost, the balance or the answer to this equation is that I could take my gun off of my hip right now and lay it on this table, and as long as you or I don't touch it and don't pull the trigger on it, not a single person is going to die. It's not the gun. If you go to other countries where they have very stringent gun laws, knife is the weapon of choice. There was one time that London, and it may still be, London had a higher homicide rate than the city of New York, and it was knives was the weapon of choice. You can go back in the history of time where rocks were being used. Right. So it's not the rock, it's not the knife, it's not the car that gets driven into someone. All of these things we see when violence happens, it's not the gun, it's the evil and the intent of the person with the rock, the knife, the car, or the gun. So that's the first thing that we have to look at. Now, once we get past that, the next thing we have to look at is what's the driving force behind this? And I will tell you that our mental health system in this country is broken. It's time to throw the baby out with the bath and start all over. We went from being a nation that looked at how do we treat mental health to being a nation that looked at how's the least expensive way to treat mental health. Right. How can we privatize and save money? There are some things you just don't want to save money on, and that's mental health to me is one of those. We need to be putting every dollar we can, and I think most taxpayers would agree with me that that's one of the most important things right now, especially when we see how that mental health spins into these mass shootings. So I think we have to really put emphasis on that. The next step of that is people that that see something, and we always ask our citizens, and they do it here, if you see something, say something. But there are red flags out there on a lot of these mass shootings that if somebody just said something, we would have been able to deter that from happening. There are ways that, I'll use Parkland for example. They decided in the Parkland scenario, as it came out in all the hearings, rather than treating criminal acts as criminal acts and administrative acts as administrative acts, they decided to treat them all as administrative acts. And so there were missed opportunities to incarcerate and dig deeper into what was driving crews because they chose to not treat it as a criminal act in the school. We have to stop that. We have to say, let the law be the law. And if it violates the law, then let the law enforcement handle it. If it violates policy, then let the school handle it from there. So those are the things I think we have to really get down to. If you go back and look at some of the different things that they've tried to pass legislatively or they are trying to do, not one single one of them would have stopped Parkland, Uvalde, none of them. Right. Not one of them. It wouldn't stop. So what I look for are real solutions, not solutions that are agenda driven, not solutions that people have seen on Facebook and think that's the answer to. If the other part of this, and I'll say this to our schools, a lot of these shootings are taking place in gun-free zones, in gun-free areas, in cities where people don't have the ability to conceal carry or to open carry. And if somebody's looking at committing a mass shooting, they're going to these gun-free areas, and we have to stop that. A gun-free zone means that the only person in there that's going to have a gun is the person with evil in their heart. And so I want to see us get away from that. Our schools, you're not coming here and shooting up my schools. You're not. Our school resource deputies are trained. Sun Tzu says in The Art of War that every battle is won or lost before it's ever fought. The battle to win that is to fortify our schools. The battle to win that is to have people on that campus other than just a single school resource deputy that can help eliminate or neutralize that threat. And so, those are the things we need to look at. Instead of gun-free zones, we need zones that say, if you bring that crap in here, you're going to get shot dead. And that's going to put a stop to a lot of it. I understand that people have different feelings about the Second Amendment, about guns and everything else, but I think we have to peel back the layers of all of that and look at what is truly going to be the game changer. And I believe that if you don't meet violence with violence, you'll be violently killed.
Sheriff Ivey, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Before we conclude, though, I wanted to ask you one last question.
Sure.
About another issue that's been working its way through the courts, and that is religious freedom and the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. And it kind of brought me back in time to 2019, pre-COVID days, when there was an issue here in Brevard County, and you had something to do with that issue. It was about a decal, "In God We Trust," that was going to be on all of our Brevard County Sheriff Office vehicles. Yep. And there was some resistance to that among the usual suspects. But in recent court cases, the court has definitely been siding with your perspective. Yeah. Want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I looked at our vehicles, and we had gotten away from having "In God We Trust" on it. And what a lot of people I don't think recognized was "In God We Trust" is on so many things. It's our national motto, it's our state motto, and it's on so many things. For example, most people don't realize that on every law enforcement officer's badge in the state of Florida, "In God We Trust" is on the badge. It's on our state seal, it's on everywhere else. So to me, it was, I want God out here watching over and I know He is, He's watching over our team and our citizens and our country. And to me, it was the right thing to do. And our citizens supported it so much. As we have to do, you have to be careful not to give anybody a bullet to shoot at you. So we were very blessed. A very generous businessman, A.J. Hires from Boniface Hires, pays for all of those decals that goes on. That way it wasn't us using taxpayers' dollars to do it and everything. Not that I think there was anything wrong with it, but it just took away one of the arguments from it. It did. I got a letter from one of the anti-organizations that told me to cease and desist. And I sent them a very encouraging letter back that I signed, God bless. And never heard anything else. And you're right, the courts have been very strong in their rulings on this. And so for me, you know, I believe that you do the right thing and people will support that right thing. And so for us here locally, it was a non-issue. But at the national level, it got some attention, right. and as you well know, all of our cars have "In God We Trust" on it, right. As does our badge and our money and everything else. And I remember telling a few people, if that offends you, then please give me all your money, because it's on every dollar bill right. you have. So, right. But you know, again, it was about making sure our legal team had looked at it, because we more than anybody else needs to stay within the parameters of the law, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't stepping outside that. So we'd researched everything and went forward with it.
Well, I think we can conclude that freedom needs faith and it needs family.
Absolutely.
To survive.
No doubt.
Sheriff Ivey, it's been an honor and a privilege to have you on our campus today. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for your leadership and for keeping Brevard County safe.
Thank you, my brother. Thanks for having me, my friend. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.